Okay, lovely. I've got me here, who is the founder at DueDilio, which is a matching network for all types of diligence professionals. And I also have Bill Barlow. He's a partner at Barlow and Williams, a firm that provides legal counsel specifically for business transactions. Lovely to have you both here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How are you two?
Doing great. Doing great. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great, great. Okay, so today we'll talk about legal due diligence and the process and possible impacts in the future and risk mitigation, among other things. So let's jump into it. First question here. Why would you say preparation for legal due diligence is so important for a business owner going into any acquisition, Bill?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the main reason is because you don't want any sort of hiccups to happen when you're going to a close. And there are a couple of things that if you prepare for it ahead of time, getting your contracts in order, getting all of your agreements in order, you can make sure there are no surprises along the way. Because the last thing you want is to get, very close to the finish line and then suddenly something comes up, the valuation has to change, other things have to change. Maybe the buyer isn't the right buyer anymore. And you can avoid that whole situation in the first place if, you just take some simple preparatory steps ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And what would you say? What does legal due diligence involve from a business seller perspective?
So the main thing is you'll be collecting a lot of your documents. You'll be preparing them to put them in the data room. So any documents related to ownership, you want your cap table showing who exactly owns what shares, all the documents related to that, any shareholders agreements, any other safes or equity agreements. Then you're going to want all of the contracts that you have. If you have a lease, if you have employee contracts, if you have contracts with vendors, other things, and just put them into separate categories. And really just anything legally related. Lawyers it's okay to put way too much in because lawyers will be able to filter out and find the relevant stuff. So anything that's legally related, just get that together in a Dropbox so the lawyers can take a look at it. And that's the main battle.
Yeah. I guess that's also where experience comes in, right? Once you have gone through several of these ones, you will know and be able to filter very quickly, and that's very important.
And the other thing I just say is if you're a regulated business, you want to have a list of your licenses, your permit, basically anything legally related that you need to do as part of the process. It just makes the whole thing a lot smoother.
Yeah. And so potential findings when you go through this, how will they impact both the transaction but also the valuation of the business?
So the good news is that a lot of times the legal diligence process is mostly just checking boxes. And as long as you check all the boxes, it really comes down to financial metrics. But there are times where that's not the case. And if you don't check some boxes, some bad things can happen. So just to give you a couple examples of when it actually affected deal value, I was recently on a deal where it turned out that the owner did not actually own all of the intellectual property, but that they were a European seller and they had sold on the assets in a couple of different steps to different organizations. They hadn't papered it properly, and the buyer was not willing to take the risk that the IP hadn't been transferred correctly and those types of things. So it just created a lot more hair on the deal, and the buyer ended up walking away because they just didn't want to have to deal with that situation. I'm dealing with another situation now where we just found out a couple of weeks ago that the seller, and we're representing buyer, but the seller had not paid their sales taxes for a number of years. And it's an asset sale, so that's one of the few liabilities that can potentially track the assets. So, that actually, that's a potential over $1 million liability, and that's going to factor into purchase price. And, that's going to be a material issue.
Yeah, wow, that's definitely something that's super important and could have been mitigated if you'd had the timeline, right? Uh,
Exactly. Just get the paid.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so what would you say that a seller can do from a legal perspective to minimize any future potential risk when it comes to lawsuits that could happen after the transaction has been made?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is always good preparation. So, if you do a good job making sure all the issues come up beforehand, then there's much lower likelihood that the buyer discovers something and that results in litigation. So that's always the best thing that you can possibly do. But the other thing you want to do is you want to be very careful about what you say in the purchase agreement. Usually, a purchase agreement will have limitations on certain types of liabilities. So they'll say, look, you can come after me and claim, for a claim, but only up to 10% of the purchase price or something like that. And there are carves out for that for like things like you haven't paid your taxes. So there are exceptions, but making sure that's very succinct and also making sure that your only representations are what's in the purchase agreement. So you don't want to get into a fight about what you may or may not have said in diligence, something you might have said in email. Everything should be contained in that purchase agreement. And if you have good counsel, they'll make sure to do all of that. But those are some of the biggest things you can do to limit your liability.
Right. And if we touched on this a little bit, but if we think about the timeline, then when should you involve legal counsel, would you say?
So we most commonly see, it depends a little on the size of the transaction. On the type of deals we do, we often come in as seller's counsel around the time that you're negotiating your LOIs. Now, I will preface that with saying, if you think that there's cleanup work to do beforehand, it's often good to get counsel in just to do that cleanup work and to make sure everything is in order. But in most cases, if around the time you're negotiating the LOI, if you bring on seller's counsel, as long as it's not too hairy, you'll probably be able to navigate that. And Roman, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was wondering kind of on that point a little bit. A lot of business owners, they probably have already working with an attorney for contracts, maybe employment law, whatever it may be. Do you think that it makes sense to bring in an outside attorney that specifically has this M&A experience? Or do you think that working with your either in-house attorney or a legal counsel that you're already working with would kind of suffice, I guess, would be good enough? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I'm obviously a specialist M&A attorney, so I'm always going to say to bring in outside counsel. I do think if your outside counsel if your regular counsel regularly does M&A deals, if they're doing it on a constant basis, more than once a quarter, it's a regular part of their practice, then absolutely, keep them on. If this is something that they did maybe like one time in the last couple of years,
right,
they're probably just not gonna know what's market, and it's probably best to bring in, another attorney at that point.
Mm-hmm. And I guess if they are going to bring in an outside counsel, what are some questions that they should ask when they're hiring someone? What are some things that they should look for?
So, and this might seem a little obvious, but the first one is just relevant experience. How many deals have you done? Are they in a similar space? Mm-hmm. How often do you do deals? Do you do buy side and sell side? Just those type of things. And also sort of what's the range, like what size of deals do you typically do? What's your background? Did you work on a Wall Street firm? Did you, work at a big firm? Those are the main things that I would say you should ask for.
Got it. So you want to have like similar deal size experience, similar industry experience. In terms of geography, does it matter or not as much?
So I would say it matters if you have a lot of local issues that predominate. So if your business has a lot of local regulations and statewide regulations that are an integral part of the business, then it might be better to get somebody that's from that jurisdiction that's familiar with those. I will say by and large, for most businesses, it's less important where geographically they're located, more important that they have the relevant expertise. So yeah, I'd say for like 85% of businesses, that's, it's, I'd like to say when we were on Wall Street, I don't think I ever did an acquisition for like a New York corporation, even though we were New York attorneys. It was always Delaware companies located everywhere in the world. So, we're pretty agnostic in terms of geography.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, some great questions there, Roman. Thank you for that. Anything else you were thinking of?
No, I think, listen, the question that everyone's going to have is what's a reasonable cost, right? That's a question that everyone has. I don't know if you want to get into that.
I'll give you a sense. So my firm, we actually do everything on a flat fee basis based on the purchase price. So I can give you a sense, like a $5 million deal is about $20,000. That's, sort of what we're doing. And we find that's about right for the purchase price. We can, I can tell you more or less. A lot of lawyers, that's the other thing. A lot of lawyers most lawyers do it on an hourly basis. And that's fine. That's how most lawyers bill it. But, when you do that, you do want to try and see if they can give you an estimate. And if they've done enough of these deals, they honestly should have a good idea. Even if they're doing hourly, they should have a good idea of an estimate of like, this is about how much it would take. So.
Yeah, that would be a good question to also understand their experience. Another thing that comes up quite often in conversation when it comes to legal counsel, just because of the risk mitigation mentality, right, and the purpose of what lawyers do, how do you guys at Barlow and Williams work to push the business transactions forward?
Yeah, this is a critical point because there's a lot of times lawyers that will be so conservative that they will kill deals. And you don't want a lawyer that's like that. You want one that protects you but doesn't slow everything down.
Exactly.
I find the main thing is to make sure that you're coordinating with all of the different counsel, all the different parties. So that's the first thing. Especially if there are lenders involved, they can often take a long time. And so just be very cognizant of making sure that the lenders are getting everything they need and not doing that. And the other thing is, and this is where having an experienced lawyer really helps, because an experienced lawyer will know the difference between an aggressive position that's close to market and something that's completely out of left field. And so, you might get comfortable with, taking a little more risk in the agreement as long as it's sort of within the range of normal, and knowing what that range is. That's a lot of what lawyers can help you to do. And that's where you can move the transaction forward, because maybe the buyer needs a little bit more protection here, and you can find a creative way to deal with that and then still move the process forward. So.
Yeah, super. That's a good answer. That's so important. When you choose which legal counsel you want to represent you. And we're coming to the end. So super insightful. Thank you so much for your insights and for the questions, Roman. Any of you, if someone wants to get in touch with you guys, for example, Roman, if you need any type of due diligence professionals, how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm part of the BizNexus platform, so I'm easy to reach there, DueDilio.com. I'm also on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, so very easy to reach.
Perfect. And how about you, Bill?
Yeah, I'm also on BizNexus, easy to reach on LinkedIn, and barlowwilliams.law. And you can look on our acquisitions page, see our rates, and have a contact form. So that's another great way to reach us.
Okay, perfect. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.